The dubious impeachment proclamations of Alan Dershowitz, Jonathan Turleyhe. The famed Harvard law professor is making the case against himself. The saying academic politics is the most vicious and bitter form of politics because the stakes are so low is often attributed to the late Columbia professor Wallace Stanley Sayre. Late last night, retired Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz seemed to both prove and disprove that statement. Dershowitz launched into a criticism of the entire legal academy for disagreeing with his theory of impeachable conduct and even called out a fellow Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe for, like Dershowitz, changing his views. That was the petty part. But this was the Senate floor, and the stakes are hardly low with the presidency in the balance. I found myself, again, thrown into the fight through a video played by the House managers on the Senate floor declaring, in contradiction to Dershowitz, that impeachment can be based on abuse of power and non-criminal acts. The managers cut off the clip before I ended the line with, "But it is just not easy." Dershowitz has right conclusion. I hold a different interpretation, but not necessarily a different ultimate conclusion from Dershowitz. I do not believe that the House managers have sufficiently rebutted the defense of the president and specifically established the necessary intent to hold the Ukrainian aid for solely political purposes as opposed to a policy concern of corruption or sharing costs with allies. While I praised Dershowitz's presentation of his theory on Monday as cogently and powerfully argued, I still believe that he is fundamentally wrong in maintaining that impeachable offenses must be based on actual crimes or crime-like conduct. However, the tight argument on Monday seemed to gradually lose more and more definition with every hour and day. Dershowitz declared that every public official that I know believes that his election is in the public interest. And mostly, you're right. Your election is in the public interest. And if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment. More from Turleyhe: how Devin Nunes' lawsuit threat undermines Donald Trump's impeachment defense. It was a surprising and baffling statement. Where his definition of impeachable offenses would prescribe too little, this argument would protect too much in presidential misconduct. Clearly, everything that a president does in office will come with a patina of politics. However, this argument would make that common denominator into an absolute defense. It is akin to saying that the Navy cannot commit maritime crimes carried out in water. Politics is the common element of presidential conduct just as water is the common element of naval action. That is why the argument becomes circular. Presidents cannot be impeached for politics, but he argues all is politics for presidents. To use a Simpson-like construct, if it is political, there must be acquittal. Alan Dershowitz, an attorney for President Donald Trump, answers a question during the impeachment trial against Trump in the Senate at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, Wednesday, January 29, 2020. While Dershowitz encourages senators not to consider the overwhelming view of academics who he described as biased and dishonest, his narrow view of impeachment quickly unravels using the very hypotheticals that he raised. For example, Dershowitz repeatedly cited how President Abraham Lincoln's call on General William Tecumseh Sherman to release Indiana soldiers to return to that state to vote in the key 1864 election. Dershowitz also noted that Lincoln unconstitutionally suspended habeas corpus but was not impeached for either act. The examples, however, prove the contrary to Dershowitz's position. Get the opinion newsletter in your inbox. What do you think? Shape your opinion with a digest of takes on current events. Delivery daily. Your email. Degrading our defenses for political benefits or suspending habeas corpus are non-criminal acts that show why we cannot limit impeachable conduct to the criminal code. They are examples of potential impeachable abuses of power. While Lincoln could defend his authority or privileges in the courts, it is precisely such abuses that militate against the narrow definition advanced by Dershowitz. Otherwise, a president could be impeached for accepting a small bribe but not denying an entire nation the protections of its army or the Great Writ. Dershowitz makes case against himself. Dershowitz also made the case against himself in his earlier writings that President Trump could give Alaska back to the Russians. He wrote, "Assume Vladimir Putin decides to retake Alaska the way he retook Crimea. Assume further that a president allows him to do it because he believed that Russia has a legitimate claim to its original territory. That would be T.